for the longest, creativity has only been reserved for like a small group of people. The more we expand it to the most unlikely people, the further we'll go.
In 2018, a veteran of the music and streetwear industries had an idea. Beth Birkett cut her teeth in the emergent scene simmering in Soho in the late 90s, working for Def Jam while running with icons like James Jebbia and Pharrell. But as her career peaked, Birkett became disillusioned by the industry's pervasive misogyny. So it wasn't until the 20-teens, after starting a family and a family business in Union, LA, that the dynamic creative decided to step out on her own. Creating a platform within streetwear that celebrates and caters to women of color specifically, Bephies Beauty Supply is a community-focused boutique marketplace and brand. And it all started with one idea. How did your parents' professional lives inform your career ambitions?
My dad, even though he was in the military, he had a lot of businesses. He was like an entrepreneur and an inventor, and he just kind of hustled. And I definitely learned a lot from watching my dad's mistakes and also watching his successes. Even like the value of money, valuing it not so much where you're like obsessed with it, but you definitely need it, and knowing the importance of like getting the right people that know if you don't know how to handle money, how to handle money. My mom was always really good with money, and I don't think he valued that in my mom, and so that informed me too of just how we're not really valued for, for these things because we're not seen to be really good at math or good at accounting. Money is everything, but also nothing.
What do you think was motivating his sort of drive towards entrepreneurship?
I think my dad was really creative. In a small island like the Caribbean, they don't value creativity, they value education. So my parents were very educated. The passion of being able to do what you love, I guess, seeing that it didn't come so easy for my parents, because I think they weren't really being true to who they were. I tapped into what my creativity was. They didn't know that you could be both creative and business savvy. And I also learned a lot, like just business-wise from their failures. I learned that like it's okay to fail, that failing is a huge part of being a success. The whole idea around Bephies Beauty Supply was around, I've never seen a young Black girl or Black women presented in this way where they're like, I don't know, and they're just truest, realist form. And that was like my goal. Like I want people to buy something with a Black girl on it. It was just a picture I found of a Black girl who used to wear her hair the same way I wore my hair when I was a little girl.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in California called Highland High School, and it's just north of LA. I wasn't really into school. I always thought I was like better than that. I always liked working. By the time I was a junior in high school, I had a part-time job and I would leave early to like go to work.
What were you doing?
Working at a retail store, just very independent, just wanting to figure things out on my own. And then I moved when I was 17, like literally like right after graduation, moved to New York. And I didn't move to New York like knowing what college I was gonna go to. I kind of like lived in New York and then applied. Yeah, and then later like got accepted. I ended up going to the new school, Parsons, and like really just lived life, which I think made me appreciate school when I was actually in it, because once you work and you realize how hard it is, it gives you more of a focus or a purpose. And actually the internships kind of made me, want to go back to school. And so it gave me a focus,
Where were you interning?
One of my first internships was for Kiss FM. Before it turned to Hot 97, I worked for like a couple of the disc jockeys.
And then that inspired you to want to go back to school?
Yeah, well, I was in school. I was in community college, but just giving me more of like an idea of what I wanted to go to school for. And so I applied late. I applied to NYU and I applied to New School Parsons, and I just really enjoyed the classes at the New School. It was just really like a lot of great people came to talk there.
Did you have a major?
So I didn't finish.
High five. Me neither.
So I did some fashion marketing at Parsons.
Okay.
And then I did literature at art at New School. While I was there, I interned for Elle magazine, but then I started working at a place called Jerry's, which was across the street from the old Stussy on Prince Street. Mm-hmm. And then I worked at Fat Farm.
In the office or in the store?
No, in the store. Okay. Russell had, his nephew was kind of like his intern, but he would get into trouble a lot. So they needed someone to take his place, and they asked me to just move up and work in the office with Russell and Simone Reyes. So
that was your first entree into like streetwear and...
Yeah, it was the beginning of streetwear.
I was gonna say, yeah, what would you say if you were trying to describe to a kid today? What's the energy like?
Well, it was still very music, right? So it was like, so it was Russell Simmons had Fat Farm, and then I think shortly after Jay-Z had Rockaware. But before that, you also had, Cross Colors was a thing when I was in high school. And then there were also stores like Union, which was like one of the first stores on Spring Street. And that was one of James Jebbia's first stores that eventually Marianne Fusco would end up running, and it became her store.
Okay, so you're working at Fat Farm, and then from there you meet James, who's sort of taking over the Soho streetwear world one store at a time. And then you end up working for him.
Yeah, well, at the time we were friends, right? It was like James was just like, he was just a friend, and he happened to, have Union, have Stussy, and Prince Street. That was like the block, and I pretty much worked at every store on that block. It was cool because at the time James was like a peer, so it was like, whatever, like, hey, I have this store, it's really cool, you want to work here? Sure, yeah, okay, cool. It was like my really bad English accent, but but that's how it was, and it was just like everybody was just kind of hustling and doing their thing. I don't know if everybody had these grand dreams of like having a streetwear brand or business or any of that. It was just like we were
being a billionaire.
Being a billionaire, like no one was thinking like that. It was just like, oh, we're really cool and we all like each other and get along, and it kind of became a little community.
Birkett climbed the ladder within Russell Simmons' intertwined empires and moved from Fat Farm storefront to the office of Def Jam Recordings. Young, hip, and outside, Bephy got a crash course on the music industry, but also found herself battling sexism at every turn. What was that environment of Def Jam in the mid-90s like?
Working, with Russell Simmons, working in the music industry, I think, period, it definitely got me excited about like business. It definitely was harder being a woman in that arena because people didn't really take me seriously unless you were, someone's girlfriend or an assistant. It was really hard to move up as a woman, and to even be taken seriously. That would be the peak, as you become an executive assistant. And so I never wanted to do that. I just tried a bunch of different things. A lot of it was just like luck, like opportunities would arise. And after working with Russell for a couple years, being like a second assistant, I got offered a job working at MTV, being like a music programmer. And I was really young. I was like, I don't know, probably like 22, 23. And it was like an influencer job. It was like, oh, all these people, music. I, became an executive at MTV really when I was really young. That had challenges because I was so young. Again, no one took me seriously. Like they didn't know that I could actually help them get music played. I doubt myself all the time. I'm a dreamer. I realize the power that I have in manifesting things, in the words that I use to talk about myself and my ideas and the things that I want. And it helps relieve the doubt.
What was that adjustment like to go from this very bootstrapped, entrepreneurial, crazy rap world to the most corporate part of Viacom, working at MTV?
It was hard. Russell wore whatever he wanted. He talked crazy. He would be cursing. He would like completely inappropriate, but it was like he was Russell Simmons.
Sweet.
And he would even bring me into meetings. And if I wanted to chime in, I could. And he'd be like, yeah, ask Beth. She's like, she's young. She's like younger and she has her ear to the streets, and like, tell them, Beth, like tell them what they want. And then when you go to MTV, it was like very like conservative, and like people pretended like they wanted to hear your ideas, but they really didn't care. And like, I actually really hated being at MTV. I didn't appreciate it because I was like, wow, I'm here because I'm like a token Black girl. But I would speak up. I spoke up in meetings. But then coming from Def Jam, I also felt very comfortable talking to people at the time like Judy McGrath or Van Toffler, who were the head of MTV at the time, who were like executives. But my old boss was also an executive. So I didn't feel like intimidated. I wasn't like, I was just like, yeah. And, I was very honest with them constantly. And they appreciated it.
Did you know what you wanted to do next when you finally had reached your limit?
I needed to be somewhere where I could grow because I actually wanted to create. I actually wanted my ideas to be heard. I didn't want to just be around talent all the time. I felt like I was a talent wrangler, and it was awesome. Like, yeah, I got to, work with Jay-Z, work with Outkast, like work with the Neptunes, but it was also that, especially being a woman, you were just like, oh my gosh, I'm like the babysitter. L.A. Reid at the time had just started working at Arista. I told him that I was looking to leave, and he was like, yeah, I think you should come work at Arista. And it ended up being the opposite of, Def Jam, of MTV, where it was this diverse, multicultural place. Like L.A. Reid was like an R&B dude. Mm-hmm. And then there was also just like a lot of toxic, being a woman, they were like, well, like, how do you know this dude? How do you know L.A. Reid? Like, how did you get here? What are you really doing here? Like, people started questioning me, that I didn't get there for my ability, that I didn't get there from even my connections. That theme was like, it couldn't have been further from the truth. And it was like a huge distraction because I was like, I really want to move up in this business, and I literally can't because I'm a woman, because people assume that I'm only good enough to sleep with someone or be someone's girlfriend or be someone's wife. And it made me really sad. I ended up leaving. Well, I got laid off. It was both, but I was in a contract, so I was able to like really think about what I wanted to do. And music was not it. It was just like toxic. It was only a place for men to succeed. And I didn't know what to do about it.
While she was facing uncertainty professionally, Beth was simultaneously finding peace personally. She had rekindled with Chris Gibbs, her then boyfriend and now husband, whom she had introduced to James Jebbia years earlier. Chris had risen to a senior level at Union, one of Jebbia's stores, and the couple were presented with a unique opportunity, the chance to purchase the store.
Chris had been working at Union, New York for years, and then in Union, LA, so he was ready to take it over because he knew everything that was wrong with it and everything that was right with it, and he knew what it needed to like really grow. At the time, Union was just a multi-brand store. I believe it was James's first store, and so it didn't really make a ton of money because it was just, selling a lot of other people's products. And then at the time, like especially when Chris took over the buying part of it, he, brought in a bunch of higher, more expensive brands. So like Duffer, he eventually bought in Bape, and it was just expensive. Obviously we would make the money back, but that was it. There wasn't, a lot of revenue to make off of other people's products. Union went from being kind of really like a skate, like hip hop shop to like a very high-end clothing store. But again, it was just like, it just couldn't, you were like limited on its growth because the brands were so expensive and you were just, paying that back. So eventually they decided to sell it and Chris took it over. We found the money and he was able to buy it. Being a small business is just a lot of problem solving. And it's hard and stressful, but it's also kind of fun, like to have to figure out things that you typically wouldn't use your brain. It's like, mental gymnastics, how to make things appear to be bigger than they are. And it's the whole idea that every business, in order for it to be successful, starts big. It's like we don't really pay attention to the mom and pops and the slow grind. We just see it like, oh, all of a sudden it's Apple. All of a sudden it's, this brand, it's that brand.
So you guys set up shop in LA. You opened the store here, and you were in the early stages of motherhood, which is like 3 full-time jobs in one, and getting this business off the ground. What was that like?
Motherhood, it was like a big teaching moment. Like I learned a lot about myself. It was very lonely at first because I was really the first of my friends to even have kids. Like no one at 28 from New York was like having kids. That was like all in the scene, And so it was really lonely. Like I still worked when I was pregnant. I worked at MTV, like on some like reality shows doing wardrobe and styling. And I also wasn't able to be as ambitious, because it wasn't about me anymore and it was about this other person, which was good, which was like partly a relief, but then partly like, oh wow, like it's not about me. And it wasn't about me. It was about Solomon and it was about Chris and it was about all these other people. So it was really hard to like make that transition. Having a career that involves your family, working with your family, it's the biggest and almost the hardest that I would have thought of to obtain.
Turned off by the industry, Birkett decided to focus on family and building. So she and husband Chris moved to LA and birthed their first child and their first business. And through the process of raising both, Bephies' vision started to come into focus. In this time after having your first child, you've ended your first phase of your career. What was the process of bringing your ambitions back into focus?
I remember being like having a conversation with Chris, like, he's like, what do you want to do? Like, well, what did you used to love to do? And I was like, this. I've been a part of this. It was like I was kind of fighting the whole streetwear thing because it was like, I really felt like because I was a mom and I was a woman and I was also a little scared to just go back in that space. What I used to do at Union early on was I was really head of marketing and I would do social media basically. And, a lot of our social media feeds would be just like tumblers of just like naked women, half naked women, like women in fucked up situations. Like, that was streetwear at the time, like early, it still is. Fashion was changing and streetwear was this new thing. And it was very much about these dudes, mainly rappers, and their girls and their hot girls. You were like a poster, you were like a prop. It was like, who's the prop? And I didn't fit the prop, because I talked too much. I had an opinion. I was a boss. I was like, hell no,
How were you guys thinking about growing the Union brand in that period of like late aughts, early, teens?
I realized, James Jebbia started a clothing brand because that makes the profit. Like we can't even sustain like selling other people's clothing. We need to have a private
margins
label.
are too low.
Yeah, like the margins are too low. His whole thing was like, well, I'm not a designer. And I'm like, but you don't have to be. I mean, even restaurants have like merch, right? They have like a t-shirt and a hat and a mug. And it's like, even that would be fine, because people like, it's just one little store. People just want a piece of it. And I remember this was like a real issue, like in our relationship. Like he was just like, felt like I was being like really pushy about it. But I was like, this is what we need. We're both very different in our approach. Me being like more aggressive and more assertive hasn't always been appreciated. And so that's been the challenge, like me even questioning myself, like, is it okay to be assertive? Is it okay to be, this way? But yet it's okay for men to kind of be every different way. Like, oh, I need to take my time. Okay, take your time. Like, I wish I had that luxury, I started feeling like maybe how my mom felt with my dad, like not appreciating what you're actually bringing to the table. That's why even more so, I was like, I have to do my own thing. I love to create. And so a lot of my ideas will start with like a really simple DIY project that I kind of put together. I don't know, I just like mixing pieces together, like in the form of a collage. So this is the table where I kind of can lay everything out. I can do some sewing. The whole idea is really just to create like a CAD, really. It's not like just an idea, especially if you want to do something that's like really different. Bephies Beauty Supply is new. It started during COVID.
Really? Okay.
I'd been wanting to do Bephies for a long time.
Yeah,
like I had done,
collabs.
Collabs. I had done even Complex Con with Union, but I wasn't able to really focus on it until recently. Every job I did, I just put it back into my brand, into Bephies, into what we were doing, even Union. Every job, everything we did outside of Union went back into Union. So it was really hard to like make that transition. It was the beginning of COVID. And I remember, you reevaluate everything. You're like, what's next? And I remember wanting to do a brand, but also being like, but do we need more clothes in the universe? Like, do we need another clothing line? And so I really wanted it to be a marketplace to help other women and other women of color, because I felt like it was the hardest for us because we don't necessarily have access to capital, and then you're a woman. And so I just wanted to like help, like even if it didn't mean financially, it just meant like with my connections and my knowledge and what I know. I just wanted to like help other young girls or young people make it a little easier for them where it wasn't for me. And obviously, like, with everything that happened, with people just like waking up to like all the, not only sexism that's going on, but racism that's going on, I think it's made it a little easier to have a platform like Bephies Beauty Supply where you can talk about empowering other, Black and brown women. I get creatively blocked when I overthink things, because when you're overthinking creativity and you're overthinking ideas, you realize it's in the simplicity of things and not in the grandeur of like this idea.
You've launched Bephies Beauty Supply in a very boutique way with, organic, small drops, limited runs. What do you imagine the brand to look like at maturity?
I like to keep it small and limited. I really think that idea did come from, the streetwear came from, the Union, the Supreme, the Undefeated models of like limited edition or limited supply of things, creating more demand. But it also keeps like your costs down for like having a ton of people. Like I love how a lot of those companies, like even though they appear to be really big, they're really small. And so keeping like just like a small group of people and then just kind of like passing the baton.
As you grow this business in this very deliberate manner, like what are the steps that are involved in doing that?
So it's just revamping our identity. We need to be more clear about what it is that we sell or not sell. I do clothing, but very small. Like we do merch, like we definitely do a t-shirt, definitely do a hoodie. And it's definitely inspired by, some really dope woman or a woman of color that's maybe been hated on, the underdogs. And then also doing like a lot of hair accessories because I'm obsessed with hair. Hair is everything, but making it fun and not this chore where you're like, oh, I have to get my hair done. It's like, oh, what am I gonna put in my hair today? But also elevating these hair accessories and also doing just more collaborations across the board and incorporating, hair and hair accessories into even some of the bigger brands that I collaborate with, like a Jordan or yeah.
Do you have a Jordan collaboration?
I do have a Jordan collaboration coming out, and supposedly it's going to be coming out in June of 2022. I say supposedly because like these drops get moved all the time. Yeah, but it's happening. I'm excited.
Congratulations.
I'm excited about, never thought I'd be designing a shoe, but designing a Jordan 7 and some apparel as well. And of course, some accessories, some hair accessories. There is a lot of creativity that goes into like what product that you're making. We like to think that like as designers that we're just, making something because it's beautiful or it's cool. But there's a lot of like thought that goes into that outside of the visual part that we don't think about. And I think tapping into that part of your creativity, I don't think people really value that.
You recently appeared on a reality competition show, The Hype, on HBO Max. How does that fit into sort of your larger ambitions with Bephies Beauty Supply and just your career in general?
I mean, I really did this show to promote Bephies Beauty Supply, to have a bigger platform. But what I didn't realize is that I would be doing what I'm already doing, which is like just helping the kids like navigate this, this world, whether it's like launching their own brand or just telling them the stuff that I've learned and encouraging them to keep on keeping on.
So when you're thinking about the brand, how far out do you plan?
So we don't plan out like too far ahead. I mean, we plan for at least like the next 6 months, but a lot of what we're doing in terms of like designing hair accessories, we're making prototypes that haven't really been done before. So it's a lot of trial and error. So in the meantime, we're doing, socks and like styling accessories, I call them. Tights and armbands and gloves and hair scrunchies and headbands.
When you reflect on the last 15 years of being in this apparel and retail business, what are the most important lessons that you would share with someone, a young person that's thinking about entering into the space?
Really, as hard as the hard parts are, you're not feeling so great about yourself is when you actually get to learn about yourself. And the more you know about yourself, the more you love those things about yourself. You see what your strengths are and your weaknesses. A lot of kids come to me, a lot of them wanting advice like, hey, how can I be like a mom like you? Or how can I run a business like you? And I'm just like, everybody has their own path. And you should want your own path. Because I couldn't tell anybody what my path was gonna be. I had to just be in it.
Has there ever been a moment where you felt like the business could go off the rails?
I think there's always moments of that. I think that's part of having a small business. I think it's just up to you. Like you have to decide whether you're just gonna stick this out, because it doesn't happen just like that. It's not like you make one thing and all of a sudden you've arrived. People like to think that these things just like happen overnight, and they don't. And it's really just like, you staying on the path. And even when it gets hard, it's just like problem solving, being able to pivot, being able to compromise, but also not give up. That just like hustle, you just have to love it, because a lot of times it's not fun.
What are your immediate goals?
To make and create things that change the way we wear things, the way we shop even. My immediate goal is making sure Bephies Beauty Supply is still around in the next
Getting it off the ground.
year. Yeah. So real simple.
What are the wins that keep you engaged and excited and happy?
I think the minute it starts getting like predictable is when it's not fun anymore. I think I like the fact that like every day is something different. It never stops. But I think as long as you love the process, then that's all it is. Because once you get to the destination, it's kind of over. And you're like, what's next?